She said Daddy wasn't breathing, then pointed to the ledgers with my name on them. Kevin wasn't dying. He was hiding. Right there on his desk were forged loan documents, 6 figures of debt he'd stuck on me. While I called 911 for the staged collapse, he'd already laid the groundwork to vanish. His daughter watched cartoons in the next room, but the second punch came harder. His wife Melissa looked me dead in the eye and said, "Maybe it's best if you take the fall. They didn't just frame me. They planned to erase me. Too bad they forgot. I audit everything, and I don't forgive betrayal. I had 21 days before they took my house. I used every one. My name is Daniel Mercer, and I'm 45 years old. Each morning starts the same. Coffee at dawn, receipts filed by 9, and pride in keeping my accounts pristine. From my workshop window, steam rises from my mug while I review the day's numbers, the same way I've done for 20 years. My younger brother Kevin, once my closest friend, runs his construction business with the flash and shortcuts that started small but grew like cracks in foundation walls. His wife Melissa, my sister-in-law, wears designer clothes that appear too frequently for their claimed income. My old service mentor Frank taught me to spot patterns in paperwork, a skill I've never forgotten. I'll protect our family name, even when the math doesn't add up and questions need asking. But let me start from the beginning. It was just past noon when my niece Emma tugged my sleeve. I'd been going through invoices at my desk, enjoying the quiet of a Tuesday afternoon. Her small fingers trembled against my arm. "Uncle Danny?" Her voice came out barely above a whisper. "Daddy isn't breathing right. You know that moment when your heart stops, then kicks into overdrive?" That's what hit me. Emma's blue eyes were wide with fear, her lower lip quivering. I was on my feet before I could think. "Where is he, sweetheart?" "In his study." I sprinted down the hallway, my work boots thundering against the hardwood. Kevin had been working from home lately. Said he needed quiet to focus on some big contracts. The door to his study was slightly ajar, afternoon light filtering through the gap. I burst in and found him slumped over his desk, face turned to one side. Pill bottles were scattered across the surface, some tipped over, white tablets spilled like breadcrumbs. A desk lamp cast weak yellow light across his slack features. Behind his head, partially hidden under a folder, sat a neat stack of what looked like bank ledgers. "Kevin?" I pressed my fingers to his neck, checking for a pulse. It was there, but thready. His breathing came in shallow gasps. Emma stood in the doorway, clutching her worn teddy bear, the one Kevin had given her on her first birthday. My hands shook as I pulled out my phone and dialed 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" "My brother," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "He's unconscious, breathing shallow. I found him at his desk with—" I glanced at the scattered pills. "There are medications here." The dispatcher's voice was professionally calm. "Is he responsive at all?" "No, nothing." She walked me through the basic checks: airway, breathing, pulse. Told me to turn him on his side, which I did, careful to support his head. The whole time I kept glancing at those ledgers. Something about their placement seemed deliberate. In all the apparent chaos of the scattered pills, that stack was too neat. You ever get that feeling in your gut that something's not adding up? Like when you're balancing your checkbook and the numbers just won't reconcile? I heard sirens in the distance, growing closer. Emma's small hands were twisted in her bear's fur. "Sweetie," I said, trying to sound reassuring, "why don't you go get yourself some juice from the kitchen? The doctors are coming to help Daddy." She nodded and backed away, her shoes making tiny squeaking sounds on the floor. The paramedics arrived moments later. 2 men and a woman, moving with practiced efficiency. They asked quick, sharp questions while checking Kevin's vitals. I told them what I knew, which wasn't much. They lifted him onto a gurney, his body limp as old rope. The woman paramedic rattled off numbers and medical terms into her radio as they wheeled him out. The front door closed behind them, and suddenly the house felt too quiet, like a church after service. I stood in Kevin's study, looking at the mess left behind. No fresh work files were visible. Strange for a guy supposedly neck-deep in contracts. Just those ledgers, peeking out from under the folder like they were playing hide-and-seek. I could hear Emma in the kitchen, the refrigerator door opening and closing. Making sure she was occupied, I knelt beside the desk and carefully slid the top ledger out. My hand froze. There, on a labeled tab, was my own name, Daniel Mercer. Personal guarantees. After the ambulance pulled away, I stood in Kevin's driveway for a long moment, watching the red lights fade. Mrs. Peterson from next door waved from her garden, concern written all over her face. I gave her a reassuring nod, though my stomach was doing backflips. You know how sometimes the worst moments come wrapped in perfect weather? It was that kind of afternoon. Golden sunshine, light breeze, the kind of day that usually had me thinking about firing up the grill. Instead, I headed back inside to face whatever truth those ledgers held. Emma had fallen asleep on the couch, her juice box still clutched in one hand. I carefully removed it, draped my old Afghan over her, and switched on her favorite cartoon channel at low volume. Poor kid had been through enough excitement for one day. Back in Kevin's study, I closed the door softly and settled into his leather chair. Leather creaked. Real leather. Expensive stuff. I remembered helping him move this chair in just last month, thinking it was a bit much for a home office. Now I wondered what else I'd missed. "All right, little brother," I muttered, pulling the first ledger closer. "Let's see what you've been up to." The monthly summaries told a story clearer than any confession. Large transfers flowing into what he'd labeled as lifestyle accounts. Regular withdrawals masked as vendor payments to companies I'd never heard of. Everything documented with the precision of someone who thought they'd never get caught, or maybe someone planning to destroy it all later. I flipped through a black binder and found what made my blood run cold. A photocopied guarantee page with my signature at the bottom, except I'd never signed it. The strokes were close. Damn close. Kevin had always been good at copying signatures. Even back in school. Remember those permission slips he used to forge? Guess he never grew out of that habit. Starting at the most recent dates, I traced the line items backwards. Each one led to credit facilities where my pristine credit rating showed up as collateral. The numbers made me dizzy. 6 figures, easy. No wonder he'd been so interested in my financial statements these past few months, always asking casual questions about my assets over Sunday dinners. That's when it hit me. The pill bottles. The dramatic collapse. It wasn't a medical crisis at all. Kevin must have seen the walls closing in. Staged this whole scene to buy time or sympathy or both. The thought made my hands shake as I started taking photos of every damning page with my phone. Remember what I said about patterns and patience? My old mentor Frank had drilled that into me years ago. Document everything. He'd always said, the truth doesn't hide forever, but evidence sure can. I packed the most important files into my backpack, making sure everything went back exactly as I'd found it. Then I sat at his desk and made a list of conversations that needed to happen before sunrise. The bank would need to be notified. The business partners he'd mentioned, if they even existed. But first, I scrolled through my contacts until I found Melissa's number. My sister-in-law had always been polished, controlled. Even at family barbecues, she managed to keep her white pants spotless. That kind of precision doesn't come without awareness. The question was, go in soft or hit straight? Gentle questioning might keep her talking, but something in my gut said she'd already prepared her stories. And if Kevin had staged this afternoon's drama, chances were she was in on it too. Direct it is, then. I pressed the call button and listened to it ring, my free hand curling into a fist on the desk. Through the door, I could hear Emma's cartoons playing softly in the living room. Her whole world was about to shift, and she didn't even know it. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Melissa answered on the 4th ring, her voice casual as summer breeze. "Daniel, is everything okay with Kevin? We need to talk. Now." The words came out, harder than I'd planned. "I'm at your house. How soon can you get here?" A pause, just long enough to mean something. 20 minutes. I need to wrap up at yoga. Yoga. Right. I watched shadows stretch across Kevin's desk as the sun dipped lower. Make it 15. While I waited, I checked on Emma, still sleeping peacefully. Cartoon characters dancing across the TV screen. Used to be Kevin and I would spend Saturday mornings watching cartoons together, sharing a bowl of cereal bigger than our heads. Amazing how memories can turn bitter so fast, isn't it? Melissa's SUV pulled into the driveway exactly 15 minutes later. I heard her designer heels click across the front path. Not exactly yoga attire. She breezed into the kitchen like nothing was wrong, all perfume and practiced smile. "Emma's asleep," I said, following her in. "Let's keep our voices down." The kitchen's can lights cast everything in stark relief. Melissa stood by the marble island. New marble, I noticed, probably installed around the same time as that leather chair. She set her purse down, movements precise as always. "What's this about, Daniel?" "The doctor said Kevin just needs rest." I laid the copied pages on the counter between us. "It's about these. Specifically my signature on documents I never signed." Her expression didn't crack. Instead, it hardened, like wet clay left in the sun too long. "Oh, those. Yeah, those." I tapped the top page. "Want to explain why my name's guaranteeing loans I never approved?" Kevin handled all the financial arrangements. She traced a manicured finger along the counter's edge. The business needed stabilizing during a rough patch. Your credit rating helped secure better terms, that's all. I pulled out my phone, flicked through recent photos. Funny. Kind of rough patch. New kitchen remodel, that weekend in Aspen, Emma's private school tuition. I looked up. Those don't match any revenue numbers I'm seeing. Who authorized that spending? Melissa's shoulder rose and fell in a delicate shrug. We're family, Daniel. Family sticks together. Her eyes met mine, steady and cold. Isn't that what you always say? About protecting our own? This isn't protection. It's fraud. Such an ugly word. She picked up her purse, pulled out a compact mirror. Look. Kevin made some aggressive moves to grow the business. Maybe he cut corners on paperwork, but dragging all this into the open won't help anyone. She snapped the mirror shut. Especially not you. Think about your reputation, your standing in the community. The threat wasn't even subtle. Keep quiet, she meant. Sweep it under the rug. After all, what's family for? I leaned forward, keeping my voice level. Here's what you're not getting. Those lenders, they're going to start calling the guarantor when payments fall behind. That's me. My silence equals consent, and I do not consent. You'd really do this? She tilted her head. To your own brother? He did this. To all of us. I gathered the papers, straightened them with 2 sharp taps, including Emma. Something flickered in Melissa's eyes at that. The first real emotion I'd seen. But before she could respond, my phone vibrated against the counter. Unknown number. I stepped back from the island, watching Melissa as I answered. Daniel Mercer speaking. A crisp, formal voice responded. Mr. Mercer, this is Amanda Chen from First State Bank's Commercial Lending Division. I apologize for calling after hours, but this matter requires immediate attention. Are you aware of your position as guarantor on loans, totaling $843,000 to Mercer Construction, LLC? My stomach dropped, but I kept my expression neutral. Melissa was watching too closely. I see, I said. Perhaps we should discuss this first thing Monday. Mr. Mercer, Amanda cut in. I'm afraid this can't wait until Monday. We've detected irregular activity in the associated accounts, and as primary guarantor, you need to be informed of your exposure. Do you have somewhere private where we can talk? I looked at Melissa, still poised by the counter like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just admitted to helping rob me blind. Give me 2 minutes, I told Amanda. I'll call you right back. I stepped onto the back porch, leaving Melissa to her practiced indifference. The evening air had turned crisp, carrying that metallic edge of approaching autumn. Remember when life was simple enough that changing seasons just meant switching out the welcome mat? Yeah, those days were gone. I appreciate you calling back, Mr. Mercer, Amanda said when I dialed. I need to be very clear about the situation. Our fraud detection system flagged unusual patterns in the Mercer construction accounts late this afternoon. Upon review, we've discovered multiple irregularities that require immediate attention. My grip tightened on the phone. What kind of irregularities? Large transfers to personal accounts, inconsistent vendor payments, and most concerning, a pattern of withdrawal attempts using variant business names. She paused. As primary guarantor, you're liable for the full outstanding balance of $843,000. Given the suspicious activity, we're accelerating the payment schedule. I steadied myself against the porch railing. Accelerating to what, exactly? 30 days from today's notice. If we don't receive payment or establish a verified payment plan by then, we'll begin asset seizure proceedings. Her tone softened slightly. Mr. Mercer, I should warn you, once that process starts, it affects everything. Credit rating, property liens, business relationships. The ripples can last years. Through the kitchen window, I could see Melissa texting rapidly, probably warning Kevin. Let her. I understand, but there's something you should know. My signature on those guarantees? They're forged. I never signed them. That's a serious allegation. Papers rustled on her end. We can place a temporary hold while our fraud department investigates, but you'll need to file a formal complaint, and the 30-day clock keeps running unless we find clear evidence. I pulled out the small notepad I always carry and started mapping timelines. What specifically do you need from me? She outlined the requirements. Notarized statement, copies of the forged documents, examples of my actual signature. Banking records showing I couldn't have been present for certain transactions. My pen scratched across the paper, breaking everything into actionable steps. One more thing, I said. Kevin's company files list several major construction projects in progress. If those receivables are legitimate, Mr. Mercer, Amanda cut me off gently. Part of what triggered our review was the lack of verifiable current contracts. The company appears to have no active revenue streams. Of course not. I noted, verify all clients in block letters, underlining it twice. I'll start gathering documentation tonight. You'll have everything within 48 hours. After hanging up, I stayed on the porch, filling that legal pad with dates, deadlines, and action items. The methodical rhythm of planning helped push back the panic trying to claw its way up my throat. You ever notice how betrayal feels physically cold? Like someone replaced your blood with ice water while you weren't looking. I pulled out my phone and crafted a careful text to our parents, reviewing some concerning financial issues with Kevin's business. Please wait for facts before drawing conclusions. We'll update you when I know more. Short, clear, nothing inflammatory. The last thing I needed was family drama before I had solid answers. Back in Kevin's study, I created separate folders for bank statements, forged documents, and company records. The client list was surprisingly short. 5 major projects that should have generated serious cash flow. I wrote out their names and numbers, planning to start calls at exactly 6 a.m. Tomorrow's coffee was going to earn its keep. Setting my phone's alarm, I did one final scan of the room. The scattered pill bottles still sat accusingly on the desk. Their little drama played out. In the morning, I'd start unraveling every thread of this mess, pulling apart Kevin's careful fiction piece by piece. But right now, the weight of it all pressed down like lead. I killed the lights and pulled the study door shut behind me. Through the walls, I could hear Melissa's muffled voice, probably spinning some story to her social circle about Kevin's exhaustion and stress. Let them believe it for now. Morning would bring harder truths. I've always been an early riser, but that morning I was at Kevin's desk before the sun cleared the horizon. Steam curled up from my travel mug, carrying that rich morning coffee smell that usually centers me. Funny how comfort habits feel hollow when your world's spinning sideways, isn't it? The client list sat there like a challenge. 5 major projects that should have been keeping crews busy and cash flowing. I'd handled enough contracts in my time to know the rhythm. Materials ordered, workers scheduled, progress payments rolling in. Real work leaves real tracks. At exactly 6 a.m., I dialed the first number. 3 rings, then a crisp, "Good morning, Parkview Medical Center." "Hi there. I'm calling about the expansion project with Mercer Construction. I need to verify some payment details." A pause, keyboard clicking. "I'm sorry, sir. I don't show any construction projects under that name in our system." "This would be the West Wing addition? Started about 4 months ago?" More clicking. "No. Our West Wing was completed 2 years ago by Davidson Brothers. Are you sure you have the right facility?" My coffee went cold as I thanked her and hung up. Something twisted in my gut as I punched in the second number. The mechanical voice was immediate. "We're sorry. The number you have dialed is no longer in service." Third call. A gruff voice answered over machinery noise. "Yeah, shipping. Morning. I'm calling about invoice MEP 2374 for Mercer Construction." A rough laugh. "Buddy, we haven't done business with any Mercer outfit." "You sure you got the right place? The paperwork shows a standing order for steel, beams, and—" "Look, I've been running this dock 8 years. Never heard of 'em. Good luck, though." I stood up, needing to move. The walls of Kevin's study felt like they were breathing in and out, watching me piece it together. Remember playing with blocks as a kid? That moment when you pull one out and realize the whole tower's about to come down? That's what each call felt like. The 4th client had a physical address listed. 20 minutes later, I pulled into an industrial park, following building numbers until I found the right unit. The windows were grimy. A real estate sign faded in one corner. Through the glass, I could see dust outlining where shelving units used to stand. The space hadn't seen activity in months, maybe years. Back at the desk, I dove into the tax IDs Kevin had listed on his invoices. Each one led to dead ends. Companies that had closed, numbers that didn't. Match state records, circular references that led back to his own shell companies. You ever watch those street magicians with the shells and the P? Keep your eye on the money, folks. Keep your eye on the money. Except there was no money, just paper trails leading nowhere. I started charting it all out, drawing lines between transactions. Every invoice Kevin generated fed into another company he controlled, then cycled back through different account numbers. No actual revenue ever flowed in from outside. The whole thing was a closed loop, pumping the same dollars around and around until they looked like real business. The morning light crept across the desk as I stared at those ledgers. All those family dinners where Kevin bragged about landing big contracts. All those times Melissa showed off new jewelry or mentioned their latest vacation. Even the company trucks I'd seen parked at job sites, probably just for show, making the neighbors think business was booming. My hands were steady as I closed the last folder, but something inside felt cracked open. The coffee sat untouched. Stone cold now. Outside the window, noon shadows started stretching across the lawn while I sat there surrounded by proof that my brother's success was built on paper and promises. I pulled out my phone, thinking to call our parents, then set it back down. What could I even say? Remember how proud you were when Kevin started his own business? Turns out it was all smoke and mirrors. Some truths feel like bullets. Once you fire them, you can't take them back. The silence in that study pressed in like a physical weight. Every tick of the wall clock, every shuffle of paper, reminded me that I was sitting alone in the wreckage of my brother's lies. The late afternoon sun hit the windshield at that perfect angle, where no amount of visor adjusting helps. I squinted as I pulled into my parents' familiar driveway. The same concrete pad where Dad taught Kevin and me to change oil 30 years ago. The folders sat heavy on the passenger seat, evidence that would shatter their image of their younger son. You know that moment before you deliver bad news? When your throat gets tight and you rehearse opening lines that all sound wrong? That was me, collecting those folders and walking up to their front door. The brass knocker, Mom's pride and joy from some antique shop, felt cold against my knuckles. Mom answered with that automatic smile she saves for her boys, but it faltered when she saw my expression. "Daniel, we weren't expecting—" She stopped as another car crunched up the drive. Melissa's sleek SUV, right on cue. "I need to talk to you and Dad," I said, trying to get ahead of whatever was coming. "It's important." But Melissa was already clicking across the front walk in those designer heels she loved showing off. "Oh good, you're all here. I've been so worried about how to handle this." Dad appeared in the hallway, reading glasses perched on his nose. "Handle what? What's going on?" We gathered in the living room. That careful dance of choosing seats, everyone trying to look casual while tension crackled. The folders felt like they were burning through my palms. "It's about Kevin," Melissa started, her voice catching perfectly. "Daniel's been, well, pressuring him, right when he's at his most vulnerable." My jaw tightened. "That's not—" "He showed up at the hospital," she continued, demanding paperwork, making accusations. "The doctors say Kevin needs rest, but Daniel keeps pushing about the business." Mom's hand went to her throat. Her tell when. "She's upset. Daniel, surely it can wait until your brother's better." "Mom, Kevin's not sick. He staged that collapse because—" "Staged?" Melissa's eyes went wide with practiced shock. "How can you say that? I've watched him struggling for weeks, working himself to exhaustion while you're suddenly interested in taking over the company." "Taking over?" Dad's bushy eyebrows drew together. "Son, what's she talking about?" I opened the first folder, laying out the forged guarantees. "Kevin's been using my name to secure loans. The business is empty. There are no real clients, no actual projects. Look at these signatures. He copied mine to—" "He's had that company for years," Mom interrupted, voice quavering. "We've seen the trucks, the workers. Why would you say such things?" Melissa produced something from her purse. Kevin's hospital bracelet, still intact. "Does this look fake to you? They had to sedate him. His blood pressure was so high from stress." I pulled out my phone, scrolling through the morning's call log. Every client number is disconnected or fake. The office address is an empty warehouse. He's been moving money in circles to make it look— "Stop!" Dad held up his hand. "Just stop. Your brother's in the hospital, and you're here with accusations and paperwork? That's not how we raised you boys to handle things. We need space to focus on Kevin's health," Melissa added softly. "All this investigating, it's not helping anyone." Mom wouldn't meet my eyes. "Daniel, please, stop escalating this. Whatever's going on with the business, it can wait until your brother's better." The evening light through the windows was fading, taking my hope with it. I'd seen Kevin work rooms like this before, but watching Melissa do it, watching my own parents choose her version of reality over hard evidence, made something crack inside my chest. I stood slowly, setting the folders on the coffee table. 30 years of family photos watched from the walls as I turned toward the door. The brass knocker gleamed dully in the porch light as I stepped outside, leaving my parents bent over that damned hospital bracelet while Melissa murmured comfort. The concrete pad held the last warmth of day under my feet. Somewhere in the distance, a screen door slapped shut, reminding me of summers when family meant something simpler. I got in my car and sat there, watching shadows creep across my parents' front lawn, realizing I might be standing alone against whatever came next. I sat in my darkened kitchen that night, staring at steam rising from a cup of coffee I couldn't bring myself to drink. You ever have one of those moments where the world feels like it's closing in from all sides? That was me, watching shadows crawl across my countertop, wondering how many more nights I'd be able to call this place home. The ledgers lay spread out in front of me, mocking everything I thought I knew about family. My phone sat dark and silent. No calls from mom and dad, no messages asking for my side of things. Just emptiness, and the soft tick of the wall clock counting down minutes I couldn't afford to waste. I almost missed the buzz when it came. The screen lit up with a number I hadn't seen in years, but would never forget. Frank Martinez. My old mentor from my service days. The man who'd taught me more about reading people than any textbook ever could. "Daniel," his voice came through. Gravel warm and steady as ever. "Caught wind of some trouble. Thought you might need a friendly ear." My throat tightened. "Frank, it's complicated." "Always is, son. But complicated doesn't mean impossible. Remember that audit we ran in '03? The one everyone said couldn't be traced?" I did remember. 3 weeks of patient digging that uncovered a scheme nobody thought we'd crack. Yeah, I do. Well, I've still got my laptop and my legal pad. And I've got tomorrow free. How about we take a look at these complications of yours? The weight in my chest lifted just enough to let me breathe. "I'd appreciate that, Frank. More than you know. 700 hours. Have coffee ready." He hung up without waiting for an answer, same as always. True to his word, Frank's truck pulled into my drive just as the sun was cresting the trees. He walked in carrying his battered laptop case and that same yellow legal pad he'd used to teach me tracking patterns all those years ago. "All right," he said, settling at my kitchen table. "Show me what we're dealing with." I laid out Kevin's ledgers while Frank powered up his system. His fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency, pulling up access logs and wire transfer records I didn't even know existed. "See here?" He pointed to a string of numbers. "Every shell company leaves footprints. Corporate registrations, account holders, routing patterns. Your brother thought he was being clever, but he's amateur hour compared to what we used to track. Hour by hour, Frank built a timeline. Each transaction, each fake client, each forged document found its place in a web that finally started making horrible sense. Then, he pulled up something that made my coffee go cold in my hand. "Bank's already moving," he said, tapping the screen. "Statutory process triggered when those guarantee papers hit their system. Look at the date." There it was in black and white. An auction notice, scheduled exactly 3 weeks out. Frank handed me his red pen, and I circled it with hands that weren't quite steady. 3 weeks, I muttered. 21 days before I lose everything. 21 days to prove fraud and stop it, Frank corrected. He flipped to a fresh page in his legal pad. "Now let's break this down hour by hour. Day 1, we document every forged signature. Day 2, we trace every shell company registration back to source." I watched him lay out the plan, precise as a military operation. Maybe you're wondering why I didn't feel this organized when I started? Sometimes you need someone else's steady hand to guide you back to what you already know. "No deviation from schedule," Frank said, sliding the timeline across to me. "No emotional decisions, no confrontations until we're ready. Think you can run it exactly as written?" I straightened in my chair, feeling that old familiar focus settle into place. "Yes, sir. I can do that." He nodded once, sharp and satisfied. "Then let's get to work. Clock's running." You ever notice how the worst truths hide in the most ordinary places? 3 days into our investigation, Frank and I had filled 2 whiteboards with transaction flows and shell company maps, but something still didn't add up. "The timing's wrong," Frank said, tapping his pen against the collapse date. "Your brother didn't just crack under pressure. This was coordinated." I rubbed my eyes, tired from staring at numbers. "How do you mean?" "Think about it. Why stage a medical emergency right when the guarantees were about to surface? Why not just deny everything or try to negotiate?" He had a point. Kevin was always the smooth talker of the family. Could have tried to charm his way out of anything. Yet, he'd chosen unconsciousness instead of excuses. "There's gotta be more," Frank muttered. "What haven't we checked?" That's when I remembered something. His personal laptop. The one he always kept in that locked drawer. "The one you have access to now?" I nodded. Melissa had been so focused on playing victim to the family, she'd forgotten to clear out Kevin's study. 20 minutes later, we had the laptop fired up on my kitchen table. Most of the files were exactly what you'd expect. Business documents, family photos, vacation plans. But Frank spotted a folder labeled Insurance Docs that didn't quite fit. "Look at the creation date," he said. 2 months before the collapse. Inside, we found scanned driver's licenses with Kevin's photo but different names. rental agreements for a house in Arizona, school registration papers for his daughter. And there it was. A detailed itinerary starting with a medical episode and ending with a fresh start 3 states away. My hands went numb. He was going to disappear, leave me holding everything while he— Classic exit strategy, Frank confirmed, sorting through more documents. Create a crisis, buy sympathy and time, then vanish while everyone's distracted by the aftermath. Your signature on those guarantees? That wasn't just about getting loans. It was about making sure you'd be too busy fighting creditors to chase him. Remember that sick feeling when you realize someone you trusted has been plotting against you for months? It hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the edge of my desk, knuckles white. Maybe, my voice cracked, maybe I should just let him win. Take the hit, file bankruptcy, start over. It had hurt less than fighting my own brother. Frank's chair scraped back sharply. That's exactly what he's counting on, Daniel. Family loyalty as a weapon. But tell me something. What happens to your niece if we don't stop this? That landed hard. She was just a kid, caught in her parents' schemes. If Kevin and Melissa vanished with her now, what kind of life would she have? Running, hiding, learning that lies were acceptable if they served your interests. You're right, I said quietly. But the clock's running down. Family's already chosen sides. How do we even begin? Frank pulled out a fresh sheet of paper and started writing in his precise hand. 1. Document the alias trail. 2. Alert bank fraud department. 3. Notify state licensing board. 4. The list grew. Each item clear and actionable. No emotion, no family drama, just a straight line to justice. Kevin thinks he's got you paralyzed, Frank said, sliding the checklist across to me. Proves he never really knew you. The Daniel Mercer I trained? He doesn't break. He gets focused. I picked up the list, feeling something solid settle in my chest. The hurt was still there, but now it had direction. Your brother's running a con man's game, Frank continued, but he's got one weakness. He has to move money through those aliases to make his exit work. We track those accounts. We can trap him before he disappears, I finished. Now, you're thinking straight. Frank tapped the checklist. 1 step at a time, by the numbers. You ready to get started? I looked at the family photo still hanging on my wall. Kevin and me at my 40th birthday. His arm around my shoulders, both of us smiling. The memory stung, but it also sparked something else. Determination. Yeah, I said, reaching for my phone. I'm ready. Let's shut him down. Ever organize a trap for your own brother? Let me tell you, it's a special kind of hell. But Frank and I had work to do, and we did it methodically, like we were processing any other case. Start with what hurts them most, Frank advised, spreading papers across my dining room table. The forged guarantees, those are your hammer. We spent that afternoon building what Frank called our forensic packet. Every fake client, every forged signature, every shell company, all laid out in chronological order with supporting documents. You know how satisfying it is when puzzle pieces finally lock together? This was like that. Except each click made my stomach tighter. Look at these date stamps, I said, pointing to a series of transfers. He started small, didn't he? Testing the waters? They always do. Frank's voice carried the weight of experience. First transfer's usually just enough to see if anyone notices. When nothing happens, he shrugged. Well, you've seen the numbers. I had. The progression from borrowing to wholesale theft was right there in black and white. Early transfers of a few thousand, then bigger jumps, then the forged guarantees that put my house on the chopping block. Ever notice how betrayal has its own twisted logic? Each step probably made perfect sense to Kevin at the time. Remember that client meeting he insisted I skip last summer? The memory hit me as I sorted papers. Said it was too preliminary. Wouldn't be worth my time? Frank nodded grimly. Probably when he forged the first guarantee. Couldn't risk you being there to contradict anything. We worked through the evening, building our case in layers. Frank taught me to think like a fraud investigator. What questions they'd ask first. What evidence would grab their attention. You ever tried to compress a year of deception into a 20-page summary? It's harder than you'd think. Bank's fraud department first, Frank said, checking his watch. Then the licensing board. They can pull his contractor credentials if the evidence holds. Which copy goes where? I asked, sorting duplicates. Originals stay with us. Bank gets the full packet with certified copies. Licensing board needs the business fraud angles highlighted. They care about client patterns more than family drama. Around midnight, I finished, scanning everything into indexed PDFs. Frank showed me how to create an encrypted file drop that would let us track who accessed what and when. Professional touches matter, he said. Shows you're serious. The next morning, we hit both agencies within an hour. The bank's fraud department got their packet at 8 a.m. sharp. I insisted on hand-delivering it to their downtown office. The licensing board submission went in through their secure portal with return receipts requested. Ever notice how official systems move slower than molasses until you actually need them to? Not this time. Now for the tripwire, Frank said back at my place. He pulled up account monitoring software I didn't even know existed. Your brother's got payroll running through that shell company on Thursdays. If he's planning to pull money for his exit, he'll hit it during the regular transfer window. I finished. When it won't stand out. We set up real-time alerts on the alias accounts. Frank coordinated with bank security, briefing them on Kevin's likely disguise and the ID he'd probably use. I packed a go bag with document originals and a spare phone charger. Everything we'd need if things moved fast. Remember, Frank said, security can hold him for suspicious activity. But we need law enforcement there quick once they do. I've got a friend in fraud division who'll move when we call. I nodded, double-checking our timeline against the bank's security protocols. How long can they detain him? Long enough. Branch manager's on board. She'll slow-walk any withdrawal requests until police arrive. That night, I lay in bed staring at my phone, watching for alert notifications. You know that feeling when you've set everything in motion but can't do anything else until the trigger gets pulled? That's where I was. Just waiting for my brother to walk into the trap he'd built for himself. The irony wasn't lost on me. Kevin had spent months weaving this web of lies, and here I was, dismantling it in days. But then, lies are like that, aren't they? They look solid until someone shines the right light on them. Then they fall apart all at once. The bank's back office smelled like fresh coffee and anxiety. Through the window, morning sun caught the polished countertops where tellers were setting up their drawers. Ever notice how normal everything looks right before it all hits the fan? We've got 3 camera angles on the lobby. Sandra, the fraud manager, showed me the monitors. Plus, dedicated feeds on each teller station. She clicked through views that caught every approach angle. No blind spots. I settled into a chair beside her desk, trying to look calmer than I felt. The room was like something out of a TV police show. Screens everywhere, security radio chatter in the background. Only this wasn't fiction. This was my brother's last mistake coming home to roost. Your friend Frank's in position, Sandra said, nodding toward a monitor showing the exit area. I spotted him chatting casually with a security supervisor, looking for all the world like any other early customer. But I knew better. 20 years of service. Experience doesn't just vanish. Frank could switch from friendly to focused, faster than most people could blink. Here's what we're watching for. Sandra pulled up the alias profile we'd built. The fake driver's license photo showed Kevin with darker hair and glasses he'd never needed. Different name, different address, but the same jawline our mother always said we both got from Dad. If he follows pattern, he'll use the corporate account first, then try to move funds through personal. I leaned in, studying the details we'd flagged. The ID number sequence is what got my attention originally, I said. Last 4 digits matched his old military ID. Creature of habit, even when he's trying not to be. Common mistake, Sandra agreed. People hide in patterns they don't even know they're making. The morning crowd started trickling in. Early depositors, small business owners making cash drops. Each time the door swung open, my shoulders tightened. Remember those school presentations where you had to sit through everyone else before your turn? This was worse. At 9:17, my phone buzzed. The account alert we'd set up pinged. Deposit envelope scanned at Station 4. I straightened, eyes locked on that monitor. Got movement, Sandra murmured, fingers flying across her keyboard. The camera zoomed in on a figure in a charcoal jacket, Atlanta Braves cap pulled low. Even with the casual disguise, I knew that stance. The same slight head tilt Kevin had when he was trying to look relaxed while wound tight inside. Sandra reached for her radio. Confirming visual on target profile. Stand by for ID check. She glanced at me. Your brother's about to learn about coincidences. The teller, briefed on protocol, handled it perfectly. Smooth and professional, she accepted the envelope and alias ID. Then followed procedure requesting additional verification for deposits over this amount. Standard enough not to raise alarms, but it kept Kevin at the window. I watched 2 security officers detach from their posts, moving with that careful casualness that says nobody needs to worry, unless they really do. Frank shifted his position slightly, cutting off the clearest path to the exit. Identity confirmation, requested at 4. The teller's voice came through calm and clear on Sandra's speaker. Translation. The alias ID was exactly what we'd expected. Kevin was still standing easy, probably thinking this was just banking bureaucracy, probably running through his planned responses, all lined up and practiced, probably had no idea he'd walked right into. The security officers closed the last few steps. "Sir, could you step over here, please?" I held my breath. This was the moment it could go sideways. Fight or flight kicking in. But Kevin had never been the type to make scenes. Image was everything to him. Right up to the end. "Is there a problem?" His voice carried clearly through the teller's mic. Still smooth, still controlled. Still trying to talk his way clear like always. "Just need to verify some account details, sir." The lead officer kept it professional while his partner shifted to cover the angle. "If you'll come with us." I watched my brother's shoulders sag slightly. Just enough to show he knew. The careful alias, the planned escape, the setup he'd spent months building. All of it collapsed in one ordinary morning. Brought down by patterns he couldn't quite break and trust he shouldn't have betrayed. Sandra's radio crackled. "Subject is compliant. Moving to secure office." I exhaled slowly, unclenching fingers I hadn't realized were gripped white-knuckled on my armrest. "How long until police arrive?" "They're already outside," Sandra said. "Unmarked cars. We'll handle the handoff smooth and quiet. Bank's reputation matters too." Through the security office window, I watched Kevin sit quietly while they read him his rights. No resistance, no outbursts. Just that blank mask he'd wear at family dinners when Mom asked too many questions about the business. The officer's voice carried through the glass, clear and formal. "You have the right to remain silent." Frank touched my shoulder. "This part's by the book. Let them work." The evidence tech was methodical, laying out everything from Kevin's pockets in neat rows. The fake ID went into one evidence bag, the deposit slips into another. Each item got tagged, photographed, logged. It was strange seeing Kevin's careful plan reduced to plastic bags and property receipts. You know what really got me? The way he'd picked that baseball cap. Growing up, Kevin had a whole collection of Braves caps. Wore them backward, tilted just so. Now here he was, trying to hide under one like some kind of disguise. Old habits die hard, I guess. Sandra appeared with a stack of papers, all business. "The fraud team extends their thanks for your assistance, Mr. Mercer. The evidence package is solid, both for the financial charges and the identity theft components. What happens now? Police will process him downtown. The DA's office is already preparing to file fraud and embezzlement charges." She tapped her tablet. "Given the dollar amounts and the forged documents, they're looking at serious time." My phone buzzed. Unknown number. Usually I'd let it go to voicemail, but something made me answer. "Mr. Mercer?" "Janet Chen from the Herald Tribune. We're running a story on what appears to be a significant family betrayal scheme involving forged guarantees and hidden accounts. Would you care to comment?" My throat tightened. This was becoming public. Fast. Frank must have read my expression because he moved closer, shaking his head slightly. "No comment at this time," I managed. "Please direct questions to the relevant authorities. Sources suggest your brother attempted to frame you for business losses while planning to disappear with fraudulent funds. Can you confirm?" I ended the call, feeling slightly sick. Frank squeezed my arm. "Let the court filings tell the story. Anything you say just feeds the circus." "Right." I took a breath. "I need to check on the house situation." "The auction." Sandra nodded. "We've already flagged the fraud case memo to the mortgage department. Your file is being reviewed in light of the criminal charges." She handed me a business card. "The lien department supervisor. She's expecting your call." My hands were steady as I dialed, but my pulse wasn't. The supervisor was direct and professional. "Given the documented fraud attempt and your cooperation, we're re-evaluating the foreclosure action. I'll need you to visit the auction house offices for final confirmation of status." I thanked her, ended the call, and looked at Frank. "Need to head to the auction house. See if we cleared the numbers in time. Want company?" I shook my head. "Think I need to do this part alone." The auction house was 15 minutes across town. Traffic lights, turn signals, other cars. Everything felt weirdly normal while my whole world was shifting. I parked in their lot, walked to the entrance, and stopped with my hand on the lobby door. Through the glass, I could see clerks at their desks, phones ringing, people moving with purpose. Somewhere in there was a file with my name on it, numbers that would determine whether I kept my home or lost everything. All those careful years of building credit, making payments, doing things right. It came down to this moment. My palm was damp against the door handle. Just push it open, I told myself. Just walk in and ask. Inside the auction house, The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as I approached the clerk's desk. My footsteps echoed on the polished floor, each step measured and deliberate. The clerk, a woman with steel-rimmed glasses and efficient movements, pulled my file without small talk. "Mr. Mercer," she said, scanning the documents. "We received the fraud notification from First Regional this morning." Her red stamp hovered over the file. Given the evidence submitted and the criminal charges filed, the stamp came down with a decisive thunk. "Cleared" stood out in bold letters across my property documents. My shoulders dropped about 3 inches. "So, the sale is cancelled." She slid the paperwork toward me. "The lien has been removed due to documented fraud. Your property is clear of encumbrance." I must have been staring at that stamp longer than I realized, because she added, "Would you like a copy for your records?" "Yes, please." While she worked the copier, my phone buzzed with a news alert. There it was, Kevin's mugshot plastered across the Herald Tribune's website. He looked smaller somehow, stripped of his usual confidence. The headline was brutal: "Local contractor arrested in family betrayal scheme." The article detailed everything: the forged guarantees, the shell company, the attempted disappearance under an alias. They'd even quoted some of his high society contacts, expressing their shock and disappointment. You want to know the strange part? I didn't feel any satisfaction seeing his face up there, just a hollow sort of sadness for what could have been. A text from Frank popped up. "Melissa cleared out last night. Neighbors saw her loading up her car. Her tennis club already dropped her membership. Word travels fast in those circles." That figured. Melissa had always cared more about appearances than anything else. Once the facade cracked, she'd run rather than face the whispers and turned backs. The clerk returned with my copies, and I headed to First Regional to tie up the final loose end. The mortgage officer, different from the fraud department folks, pulled up my account on her screen. Her fingers tapped efficiently as she walked me through the corrections. "The fraudulent charges have been reversed," she confirmed, turning the monitor so I could see. "Your payment history shows current, no arrears. The account is in good standing." Back home, I went straight to my workshop. Remember that piece of oak I'd been saving? The one that came from the old tree Dad and Kevin and I used to climb? I'd spent evenings working it into something special. A nameplate for the front gate. Not fancy, just solid craftsmanship with clean lines and letters carved deep. Mercer. The morning light was breaking through the clouds as I carried it out to the gate. There's something about early morning that makes everything feel possible, you know? Like you can start fresh, no matter what came before. The old mounting brackets were still solid. Some things are built to last if you do them right the first time. The wood felt warm in my hands as I lifted it into place. Each screw went in straight and true, just like Dad taught us. When it was secured, I stepped back onto the sidewalk to look at it properly. Mercer. Simple, honest. Our family name, carved in oak that had watched us grow up. Not Kevin's version of it, not the one he'd tried to trade away. The real thing. The name Dad had given us to protect. The one Mom was still proud to carry. Standing there, watching sunlight catch the edges of those carved letters, I felt something settle inside me. You can't control what others do with a name you share, but you can choose how you carry it forward. That's when I knew what I'd tell anyone who asked about this whole mess. Betrayal cuts deep, but integrity outlives every lie.